Hey everyone, if you follow my channel, you know that I frequently comment on and even interview guests regarding their views on artificial intelligence. It's deeply fascinating to me on many levels. I think it's most interesting philosophically as it inclines one in the direction of those most basic value-driven queries like who am I? Where do I come from? What's my purpose? Does God exist? Am I a product of mindless, unguided evolutionary processes? Or is there something transcendent about me? What's consciousness? And you may even see a relationship between AI and the focus of my channel being the law of attraction. So without further delay, let's get right into it. So recently, I read and reviewed a book by a very prominent scientist, philosopher, and yes, theologian. I'm speaking, of course, about the emeritus professor John C. Lennox at Oxford. He's one of the most recognizable Christian apologists in the media today. I should just mention for the record that while I repeatedly agree with Lennox on many of his opinions, I'm personally an atheist. It has to be stated. But as I was saying, John Lennox has debated the likes of Christopher Hitchens. As a matter of fact, he won both public debates with Hitch, which is extremely noteworthy. He's also gone head-to-head with Richard Dawkins, Lawrence Krauss, Peter Atkins, and Peter Singer, only to mention a few names. Anyway, this book of his that I reviewed is called 2084. I'll have the links below if you want to watch or read my brief book review of it. But today, I wanted to make a series of videos based on that work and sort of conduct a dialogue with it. This is likely something you'll see me do quite a bit of in the future. You know, I've read a lot of books over the years, and it's a shame that all the insight I've acquired should just stay trapped inside my skull. It's also a way of journaling much of the topics I comment on. It'll allow me to defend my conclusions and retain much of the data those impressions are based on. So to begin, I think it's important to map out the terrain in much the way Professor Lennox did in his first chapter. Why is AI alarmism, or perhaps just a general interest even, completely justified? Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Dr. Lennox takes a much bleaker and apocalyptic posture toward the subject than I do. I very much respect his decades of wisdom and carefully honed reasoning skills, which perhaps point him in this direction. He makes no secret of the influence best-selling works like Sapiens and Homo Deus, by Yuval Noah Harari, have played on his conclusions. He also makes extensive reference to George Orwell's 1984, of which the tribute 2084 is palpable, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, and last but not least, Dan Brown's novel entitled Origins. These continuous allusions are poignant, as we'll see throughout my discussions with this book. Sapiens is relevant, as the acclaimed historian Yuval Harari more or less documents the evolutionary developments of our species, which John Lennox feels go too far. Now sure, Lennox and I agree in our espousal of what's called microevolution, that is, the role genetic and environmental interactions have in producing obvious and demonstrable variation in species. That's not controversial, and much in line with his critique of Dan Brown's Origins. The assertion that microevolution can ever explain the mathematical impossibility of emergent biological life is, simply put, an article of faith. As we shall see, this worldview can have profound implications with regard to our use and development of artificial intelligence systems. How so? Well, I believe I summarized that in my book review mentioned earlier when I said, what if we are just biological robots? There might be nothing to work a nerve over here. But what if there's something more to our nature? What if we're not the net consequence of mindless, unguided evolutionary processes? How can our moral and aesthetic complexities be programmed into a hunk of metal and silicon? See how powerful metaphysical assumptions can be? Now that's really the problem here, isn't it, people? If consciousness is replicable through artificial intelligence, there's really very little to be worried about. If it isn't, and John Lennox raises some redoubtable objections to that effect, then AI may well be the author of our own undoing. Enter George Orwell and Aldous Huxley. Both of their fictional novels paint a dystopian picture of how AI, instead of being this lovely tool with which to elevate humanity, a la Harari's Homo Deus, it could well instead become the proverbial tail that wags the dog. So this question is very much the centerfold of Professor Lennox's book. Are we capable of holding the reins on this undeniably potent and useful servant, Or will what's unleashed through this immensely powerful medium end up being a merciless master over us? Stop right there. Hold up. All right, peeps, so I'm just going to interrupt for a second right here. I want to show you something. You see that ratio? Look at that. 86%. 86 freaking percent of you watching are not subscribed. Why don't you like me? What are you even doing anyways? So the next time we see this little animation, what are we gonna do? Damn straight. Okay, I hate to have to set you straight like that, but it's for your own good. I don't want to have this conversation again, you understand? Anyways, as I was saying. Lennox even quotes the UK astronomer Royal Lord Rees as saying the following, and it sums up the question perfectly. He said, "We can have zero confidence that the dominant intelligences, a few centuries hence, will have any emotional resonance with us, even though they may have an algorithmic understanding of how we behaved," unquote. I also found Pope Francis's remarks in September of 2019 thought-provoking. And by the way, I pulled this from Lennox's book. He warns, if technological advancement became the cause of increasingly evident inequalities, it would not be true and real progress. If mankind's so-called technological progress were to become an enemy of the common good, this would lead to an unfortunate regression to a form of barbarism dictated by the law of the strongest, unquote. Now, as an atheist, I'm tempted to reverse such an accusation against how the Catholic Church has not always harnessed its vast influence in the direction of the Commonwealth, and how there's no shortage of barbarism in their history either. That's beside the point, though. The Pope does make a valuable comment here. It might seem odd to you, as it initially did to me, to see people like the Pope and Professor Lennox even remark on this subject. It's not apparently relevant to their main objective, is it? But Lennox makes a good argument in the first chapter. He writes, "The implications are such that it is important that, for instance, philosophers, ethicists, theologians, cultural commentators, novelists, and artists get involved in the wider debate. After all, you do not need to be a nuclear physicist or climatologist in order to discuss the impact of nuclear energy or climate change," unquote. And I mean, how true is that? It's precisely our unique perspectives that enrich the conversation. As discussed earlier, the implications of certain natural and supernaturalist opinions may cause one to see specific dangers or merits of a technology that others would be blind to. Okay, now most of us understand what artificial intelligence is, right? But this video is getting a bit lengthy. In another discussion, we'll form a comprehensive list of what is meant by the acronym AI, but I want to conclude with a couple of comments from the author. He raises two technical issues and one larger, more pragmatic question. Let's get into the technical issues of trying to produce artificial life. Lennox writes this. Number one, even if we knew the rules of human reasoning, how do we abstract from a physical situation to a more abstract formulation so that we can apply the general rules of reasoning? Number two, how can a computer build up and hold an internal mental model of the real world? Think of how a blind person visualizes the world and reasons about it. Humans have the general purpose ability to visualize things and to reason about scenarios of objects and processes that exist only in our minds. This general purpose capability, which humans all have, is phenomenal. It's a key requirement for real intelligence, but it's fundamentally lacking in AI systems, unquote. These impressions of his, I suppose, are just a couple of his distinctions between artificial intelligence and genuine intelligence or consciousness, something that can be said to have life, heart, soul, or mind. And so in conclusion to this conversation, I'll ask, as John Lennox does in his book, how can an ethical dimension be built into an algorithm that is itself devoid of heart, soul, and mind, unquote. It's a question to which I make zero pretense in knowing the answer. I don't necessarily want to rule out the possibility that we could make something proto-conscious, but I tend to share the profound skepticism that Lennox details in his book. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on all this below in the comments. I appreciate you stopping by, and we'll see you in the next one. Hey everyone, I hope you liked this video. We put up some incredibly transformative content on this channel. If you want more like the one you just watched, click the suggested video on this screen. Make sure you subscribe, and to connect with me on my other platforms, my handles are linked below in the description, alright? Take care, peeps. Till next time.